Seeking the wise,
with Aaron and Alexander discussing the just philosophy,
covering self-development, emotional processing, conscious relationships, and 5 levels of overall wellness.
Welcome to another episode of the Wise podcast. I am Aaron, and with me is awesome Alexander.
Hello, everyone. So good to be with you, and so good to be with you today, Aaron.
Yeah, looking forward to this conversation. I think we're going to just throw out loyalty and see where it goes. It's something that's been on our list for quite a long time, the term loyalty, but we even had it as an opposition to freedom or loyalty. And we can talk about the similarities and the differences between those and how they kind of correlate with each other. But let's first get a definition, Alexander, if you will, share a definition of what loyalty is in the way that we will be discussing it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be, one of these subjects that's a beginning conversation. It's something that I've looked at in the past fairly briefly, but here in the last few weeks, it's been really on my radar. And so, we're going to be coming from the perspective loyalty being like a dedication to a person, place, or thing. And what that dedication means, I think is a personal journey. And I'm just interested to see how this conversation develops, because again, this is a subject that I'm kind of like a newborn and really looking at this in a very neutral way, not trying to prove anything, not trying to make a statement, but really doing a verbal just deep dive into it and kind of live here. We haven't discussed it very much, but getting into what the so-called good aspects of loyalty can be, and then maybe what the cost of loyalty can be. And, in some situations, I've seen the cost of loyalty mean freedom. You give up a certain amount of freedom, and where is that balance point for each individual? And we may even touch on a little discernment in this as well, because sometimes the discernment of whether to be loyal or to be carry your freedom is one thing that people can get stuck in oscillation. And so that's the other side of discernment, is oscillation. So yeah, let's see where this conversation goes.
When I think about the term loyalty, the first thing that comes to my mind is loyalty to another person. I think that's where most people's minds would go, maybe in a romantic relationship, but I kind of go to like a friendship type of thing. I've had friends in the past that were in the military, and they had this like supreme idea of loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I think, to some extent you have to have that, especially if you are deployed, overseas. You have to be able to rely on the people in your unit.
Yes.
And that pressure, that kind of forced relying and trust is it kind of bonds them together. And I know when he came back from Iraq, he was searching everywhere for that same feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And, it caused him to drink a lot. And often he would say that he wanted to go back to Iraq, rather than be in the real world, because I think he felt safe when he was in that environment and could trust the people around him. So that was a really interesting experience for me to be around him. And, I was good friends with him, and my relationship with loyalty has been different from his, because it's often a challenging word for me, because I feel like it could be taken to an extreme that is a perversion of the energy. Because the way I saw him and how he related to it, it was like, you have your buddy's back no matter what. Even if they're drunk, stupid, they get into a fight, they pick a fight because they're drunk at a bar. Like, you're supposed to be there to fight with them, because that is just, I just could never wrap my head around that. Like, I'm not going to get into somebody else's thing because they're stupid enough to do it. So that's kind of where my bad taste in my mouth on the term loyalty comes from. So whenever I've heard it, I've always been like, oh, well, this is what I don't like about it. I've never really investigated the conscious aspect of it, so
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting into that if you want to start
Yeah, and
there.
I think that, this again is more of a reflective type of episode, that this is a gauge for each individual to look at. And, you know, I happen to feel that the people, places, or things that we put this loyalty into could be just a representation, an earthly representation of where we're at in our loyalty to that higher power, that divine energy, or loyal to our life, to our values, loyal to our way of life, which, here we talk about the just philosophy. That's what the philosophy is a way of life, and how loyal I am to that, and how long I've been into that, and into a point to share it and want to hopefully assist others with it. But at the same time, I'm glad that you brought up the perversions of it, because any subject that we bring up has a perverted side or an extreme. And we want to work here to work towards helping people be more towards the middle. I know I've shared before, like, one thing that I miss from sports, especially during the 80s and 90s, was the loyalty to teams. And so fans that had been like fans of certain teams for most of their life, that was kind of driven by the loyalty of the players and how they would stick together. But when you get into those extremes, like you just shared, that yes, in a certain situation, like you shared with the armed services, there's that type of loyalty is like your life's on the line. And so, yeah, when you come back and you experience that level of loyalty and dedication to one another, and then you come back to so-called everyday life, we just don't have that kind of loyalty being exemplified in our culture. And I think these are two extremes that can be looked at, and to find somewhere in that middle that, I know that I enjoy when I experience a type of loyalty or dedication. And this is one reason that I enjoy watching and listening to documentaries or people's stories of, what it took to be successful, whatever that means to that individual person. And normally that means being very dedicated, very loyal to a certain way of working out, or a certain discipline, or writing music every day to become a musician. And so we want to look at, during this podcast, both some of the useful and beneficial sides of loyalty, and then some of the costs and some of the so-called perversions or extremes of loyalty as well. And I know in relationships, some people look at loyalty as you've got your partner's back no matter what. And, you know, here's where I just question and say, well, if you're dedicated to consciousness, or a higher way of being and seeing things, then I'm I'm not necessarily interested in justifying and having someone's back in their perception, like you were saying, especially if they're inebriated or if they're extreme. I'm going to make sure that they're taken care of and they're protected and they're not in danger. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to agree or pick up the so-called fight with them as well. So I think this is a good spot to just kind of get into these murky areas. And I think these are great things for people to talk about in their relationships, whether it's intimate relationships or friends, because the key is matching that or mirroring that level to each other. And many times in a lot of relationships, that is very unbalanced, and that creates a lot of turmoil and aggravation in relationships that I've seen in my private practice.
Yeah, and maybe people relate to the term loyalty based on how they grew up in their family unit, if they had a family unit. Like, if I could see if a family, like, if it's one of those families where they just yell at each other and then they're fine after, basically, when they get into, I can see them when they get into a romantic relationship, their expectation of how that will be is going to kind of probably mirror their family unit. So they're going to feel that they could just yell and dump stuff out onto their significant other, and they're going to be fine the next day. And that's not always the case, because somebody may come from a more sensitive family, and to them, like, yelling is not healthy. So they're going to kind of be a little taken back by that energy.
Yes.
So I think that's where, one of the areas where, when you said matching, um, is where it doesn't match, and it may create friction.
Yeah, because in that situation you just gave, uh, people's family lineage and patterns that get passed down. See, that's a type of loyalty. You're going back to where you're comfortable and what you're used to, rather than developing something new with this person that you're building a life with. And so this is one of the potential downsides to loyalty, is patterns as a type of being loyal to the way that you've done things in the past. And but a beneficial way of being loyal at the same time, we want to keep these balanced, is that when you decide to create a healthy routine, and then you set up a structure and a discipline, and you follow through with that, and you become loyal to that process, then at some point that loyalty takes you from discipline into, it's a new way of being. It's a new lifestyle. And normally that takes approximately three months or so. And so we want to, I'm interested in keeping this as, of course, palatable as possible, to again, just point out some of the usefulnesses of loyalty and some of the challenges that it brings. And discernment keeps slipping in here. It keeps popping into my mind because, see, many times loyalty will keep somebody, or will help somebody, certain people, discern about things. And then at the same time, for other people, loyalty can create a lot of issues with discernment when they have a feeling that they want to and they need to go in a different direction, but they're worried about how their family is going to view them if they do it in this way. So yes, this is a very deep subject, and I'm really enjoying as we kind of peel the onion and get to these different levels.
Yeah, I think my challenge with the term loyalty does come because, and I've identified it now, but when I was younger, before I met you, before I started on this journey, I still had a loyalty to truth, to whatever I identified that as, back
Well
then.
said. Well said.
And so now it's a loyalty to consciousness, to living in a conscious way, and taking consciousness and holding it to myself to show where I have holes in my practice, my routines, and get better. But also in interpersonal relationships, like, I'm always looking at my behavior in those to make sure that I'm being conscious. So,
Mhm.
like, consciousness is, and some people, if you're a Christian, you could say it's God. You're living your life through that,
Mhm.
as a guide. And so that's my loyalty. That's where it's been challenging to, because in our culture, loyalty, that term is so often used in person to person relationships.
Mhm.
And so, like, I've always felt weird, you know, discussing loyalty on that level, because, like, I'm not going to, if I'm in a romantic relationship, I'm not going to, like, purposely not be loyal, but I can't back up somebody if they're not living to consciousness. Like, I just can't blindly do that. It's just not within me.
Mhm.
I know some other people may be able to transmute that perspective into saying that it's loving,
Mhm.
to the example that keeps coming to my head, similarly, is to just comfort somebody and tell them that they're the best. I can see, like, moms doing that to children, and even though their child is not the best, the mom is, kind of stroking the ego a little bit, but
Mhm.
trying to repair the feelings of the child, even though what she's saying is not the truth, I feel like that there's part of it I can see could be healing to the child because they're getting love, even if they're not the best. But I think it's in the words and the energy that the parent is bringing that would affect that,
Mhm.
because it could also create the alternative, which is the ego gets bigger, even, and the realism of the child is lost in that, where they can't see clearly, and they think they're the best at whatever that is because their mom said they were when they were younger.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is a great place of what I want the emphasis to really be on this episode is that for everybody to just take time to ponder and contemplate what you are loyal to, because this is something I don't feel like a lot of people have really taken the time to get clear. And because in this, you're saying that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that you're more loyal to being truthful with the child than you are to necessarily just give the child what they want to hear or what the child feels like they may need to hear in that moment.
Let's just say that the child is in T-ball or something, and they really are awful. They can't even hit the ball on a tee, and they hit the tee, and the child is kind of sad about that because the kids are making fun of them, and everybody says that they're no good. So I feel like there's a way that like a mother in particular, let's bring in the feminine energy, that a feminine energy could skew the child's mind, and because the mom could be like, you are the best, I've never seen anybody better.
Mhm.
Almost like Trump, the way Trump talks. I've never seen anybody. um and I feel like that is like the child could buy into that and then think that they're the best, or there's a way where a mom could bring in consciousness and word it in a way where it still could help the kid feel better and understand better, but it's still set in realism. So she could say, "Hey, you just started. Practice. Practice will help in that way." Because I see in our culture that we're moving more towards can't hurt anybody's feelings. You just have to say everybody's beautiful no matter what,
Mhm.
and there seems to be this like unrealistic understanding, or like it's creating people who have no idea of reality because they live in this fantasy world where everybody gets a trophy, everybody, is a 10, everybody deserves the best person, and that's just not reality.
Right. Yes, and this is, fairly common and why again here we're hopefully inspiring people to get clear on what they do value and what they're loyal to. And I agree with you that there is different ways for people to still uplift that child, so to say, being a little bit more discerning with the language that they use. But we have to accept at the same time that everybody's not going to put that much energy into, every situation with their child. But this gets back to, whether the loyalty is to being positive. And some people, that's a stage that they go through that, and some people it's their life that they just come from a more positive outlook. Some people come from a more pessimistic outlook. And hopefully, we can see the benefits of both. But this philosophy is about seeing things as clear as possible. And so that is part of putting our personal preferences to the side and being loyal to that conscious view. And that conscious view, once again, in our description, is that it's not flavored by any preference. It's the clearest view that you have of what's actually happening. And in this, many times loyalty has gotten people in trouble. Like, yeah, say somebody is loyal once again from the armed services and come back and then they're just in a bar and they happen to get drunk and then yeah another so-called marine, they strike up a conversation and then they get into some trouble that might could have been avoided if that loyalty would have been able to been shifted and those two connected on a different type of loyal, of like having each other's back to make sure we don't get in any trouble, rather than proving ourselves or something like that. So again, just I want the listeners to take time to, during and after this podcast, to just kind of maybe consider making a list of 3 things that they feel like they are loyal to. And even if that gets down to sports teams and something that can seem that fairly insignificant, it's still that loyalty, see, clouds or puts a film over how you experience every game. Because when you have that loyalty, you're not seeing things as clear as you can because you have a preference of every call of the score of these things. And so that's the other side of this subject, is seeing that your loyalty skews your view of things unless the loyalty is towards clarity, consciousness, if you want to call it truth, but truth is something that is changing and evolving for most people. So this is why right now with the politics that's going on, most people are loyal to a certain branch of government, and then it's just whoever fills that slot, they're going to be loyal to that branch. And that's always been super confusing for me. I don't really get into politics very much at all, but see that any type of loyalty that we have, it limits our perception. And that's what we want to get across. We're not saying that loyalty is bad. We're not saying that everybody should change what they're loyal to. First of all, get clear on what you are loyal about, and then be conscious about how that is, or be honest with yourself about how that is skewing your perception with every bit of information that comes in. So this is it's got my mind interested in continuing this deep dive with myself and continuing to look at the things like right off the bat, similar to you. I'm loyal to this path and to consciousness and to clarity, was what I call it, over truth, because many people's truths can be tied into a belief system, and belief and truths are very similar in most people's language. It's very different in the Just Philosophy's language. But this is where, loyalty can get very skewed. And this is, can cause problems and help simultaneously with where discernment is issued. And a lot of suffering comes from the lack to be able to discern. And certain things that we're loyal to can keep us from making clear decisions because we're scared or concerned about the repercussions of that loyalty.
Culturally, I feel like there's a loyalty to people's feelings. And so we're always trying to make sure everybody feels good. And that is extremely inauthentic because, as we know, feelings are a choice. Feelings are the result of our bodies, our spirituality showing us where we have work to do. And if we cater to that, then we're not being real to everyone. And it's also not our job to point out everything to everybody. But the opposite side of that is if we had a culture that was loyal to consciousness, that was loyal to understanding and respecting that everybody has certain lessons, they have to be able to work through those and grow. So that's like a loyalty to growth, a growth mindset culture. And I think in the past, we've kind of had that more with the blue collar, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but kind of cause and effect. I think the blue collar generations understood cause and effect, but it was way more in a very masculine way. There was no nurturing of people through that. It was just you bang your head, it hurts, you get over it, you rub butt on it, and you move on. Right. And so instead of bringing more in the feminine to be a part of that masculine, we totally just flipped now to the perversion of the feminine, which is just feel good, everybody be positive, it's all about feeling good. And all that. But the way I would be loyal to somebody, or the way I would want somebody to be loyal to me, would be somebody who wouldn't be afraid to call me out in a nice way, or nice, respectful way,
Mhm.
where, if I'm not seeing something clearly, like the way we do this, like I ask questions, and you're always there to help me out. And I have a couple other people in my life who kind of play some of this role for me. But that's kind of where I prefer loyalty, is like you're still looking out for my best interest, which is my growth, and not falling into some mindsets that could severely take me off my path.
Mhm.
Like you're there to be that light, to be like, okay, well, here's what you're doing. And it's still my choice. Like you're not interfering with my life, but you're almost there as a guide, and or another set of eyes, or you're there to help me because I'm loyal to consciousness, and you're there to help me be loyal to consciousness in times where it's hard. So that's where I prefer to have loyalty between two people.
Yeah, and I think that
Go ahead.
that's a beautiful, description, because many times, a healthy loyalty can be built with somebody that exemplifies something that you aspire towards, like who we get advice from. Like there's so many people with opinions out there in the world, but the main thing that I suggest to people is pay attention to what the person is practicing in their day to day activities around what they are giving, suggestions or advice about. Because loyalty can also bring on stress and a pressure to follow certain directions or certain suggestions. Because a lot of the culture falls under that if you don't get someone's approval, then you're not going to get their support. And we just recently did a whole episode on this point right here, because that pressure is counterintuitive. We still got to allow people to go through whatever karma they need to, or go through whatever lessons in life that they need to. And just because someone asks me my view and I give my view, and then they don't follow that suggestion, I learned a long time ago that I'm just going to stay frustrated and bitter if I expect everyone to take every piece of advice that I give. So again, this is where, when we choose to be loyal to our life, loyal to that higher energy, we call it divine energy, whatever you want to call it, God or Allah, whatever it is, the term that you want to use, that when you stay loyal to that, then, and you learn to manage your emotions. And earlier, Aaron was talking about feelings and us being led to basically cater to other people's feelings. I want to inject emotions here. There's definitely a difference between feelings and emotions. And I think everything you were describing was more of emotions. And that's where, when we learn to manage those emotions, the very first step in that is realizing that we're not seeing things clearly when we're emotional. See, that doesn't have to be negative or positive. It's just a fact that when we are experiencing emotions, we perceive things differently than when we're not emotional. So here, being loyal to that that consciousness or that higher energy, part of that process is managing those emotions so that you can see things as clearly as possible. And again, we're talking managing here. We're not talking detachment from emotions. I'm not speaking to not experience those emotions, but I also have taught over and over in these episodes that emotions are very similar to children, and we can manage them very similar to how we can optimally manage children. And again, the lessons are always, whatever something is external, there's an internal value to that. And this is the association I make with children and emotions. And the person that learns to manage their emotions optimally winds up typically being the optimal type of parent. And it's true the opposite way too, that somebody that is extremely emotional and not able to manage those emotional situations, many times they are very traumatic type of a parent. Not that that's what they intend to do. So So again, hopefully this is shining light, just like a flashlight for people to do a little personal deep dive and to get clear on what you are loyal to. And a key here is pay attention to what you feel like you want to defend. Defense is the very first acknowledgement that there's some loyalty here. And so that's, I feel like, a good place for people to start, that if you're having trouble figuring out what am I loyal to, pay attention every time you get defensive about somebody or something, and that will start to reveal some of this loyalty.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this free full version of the Wise podcast. Now, before we get back to the episode, I just want to take a second and say, if you are loving what you're hearing, we do have a complete conversation premium subscription option where you can get all of our back 160 plus episodes to utilize and further your self-growth journey. And you can do that by going to the wisewisepodcast.com, click on the Get Complete button at the top, and follow the instructions. If you have any issues, you can reach out to me and I will help you take care of them. But this is for the serious individuals who are ready to take that next step, ready to make their self-growth journey a priority, ready to enhance their relationships all around, ready to accept the world for how it is and no longer be torn by the duality of the external reality. Oh, I like that. So if that's you, if you want to take that next step, consider supporting us on this journey and sharing this information. Now, if you're looking for a little more Alexander and maybe a private consultation, you can reach out to him at his website, thejustphilosophy.com, or email him at alexander@thejustphilosophy.com. On his website, you will see his different offerings, a variety of relationship coaching, energetic design consultations where we'll look at your human design chart and your destiny cards and provide a personal prescription for you. If you're in the North Carolina area, Alexander also has a variety of different sound journey events that are being posted on his website. He also is the inventor of the Vibertune sound therapy table, which 15 minutes on this vibrating table, listening to music that he composed, leaves you in a state of contentment. It feels like an energetic blanket has just laid upon you and you're back in the womb. It's a really great experience. So if you're in the North Carolina area and you want to reach out to him to even just ride the table, reach out to him at his email address. And of course, he has a variety of other tools and music that he's composed that you can get there. So anyway, with that said, I want to get you back to the rest of this episode, and thank you for working on you. Yeah, let's bring in that term freedom that we brought in at the beginning and talk about it on the scale of freedom versus loyalty. But first, I wanted to bring in the way you were discussing being able to give your view on something and not being attached to whether that person took the advice or not. Like, you're allowing freedom in it, and you're allowing it to not affect your loyalty. And I'm not sure that's how that freedom versus loyalty pendulum works, but that was just one thing that I noticed in that. But yeah, how should we, or how do those two terms correlate?
Yeah, well, I think that's a beautiful way that you just mentioned that. Yes, the more freedom that you can give someone, which is the very first key to love, in my view, the very first connection to love is freedom. And so when you're giving a suggestion or a direction, if the person can feel the freedom to still move into it however they choose to and know that they're going to have your support either way, see, that takes away that pressure of, well, if I don't do it the way he said, then he's going to be upset with me and blah, 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 blah. And that happens a lot with so-called unconscious people. The other way we can look at the freedom versus loyalty is in the scenario with, say, the two armed forces friends. And then they have each other's back in a war or something like that. Then they come back to so-called normal life. And see, in that, they can be in a conversation, maybe at a pub, having some food, some drinks, and talk about the old days of having each other's back. And then, yeah, one of them get a little tipsy, bump into somebody, and then want to start a fight. And see, his buddy at that time has to give up a certain amount of freedom of like how he's going to spend the rest of his evening, moving after talking and hanging out with his friend by engaging and being loyal and having this guy's back and possibly even getting into a fight. And then, you know, when that friend goes home and say they're a little beaten up, then they have to explain to their partner of why this went down. And see, that's going to be challenging for the partner of the friend to see that as them thinking for themselves, because now it just seems like you didn't think about you didn't think about us. You gave that freedom away to go towards this loyalty. So again, it's both versus and it's also together, the loyalty and the freedom. They can be polar opposites, but they can also come together and be parts of the same process in a conscious way. So see, we have a conscious way of seeing them come together, and then we have an unconscious way to see how they polarize each other. And our government and the media and things like that focus on the polarization. But see, there's always, due to the law of polarity, the second pillar of this philosophy, polarity versus duality, those opposites have to exist. So there's always a way when polarity is present that it can oppose each other, or it can come together like the yin and yang symbol and make it even stronger. And that's very important. That's why this isn't an episode based on an opinion or a stand that I'm working to get across here. It's a very open discussion and with a lot of variables in it that we're doing the best to shine our flashlights on all aspects of it to just hopefully help our listeners to discern and to get clear on what they want to be consciously loyal to.
Yeah, the more somebody gives me freedom to be myself and make my own decisions in any type of relationship, it's going to make me want to give more loyalty,
Well said.
like just naturally, because that person respects me, so I'm going to respect them back. I'm going to, it's like it feeds back. It's like feedback.
Yes.
You give freedom, you get back loyalty in a way, with me anyway.
And I think this is just a good reminder with everybody that's out there throwing your opinion around, is just pay attention to how attached you are to that opinion. And when you're attached, you're not giving freedom. So you're not truly allowing that person to make up their own mind, their own decision, because there's a threat there that, oh, if you don't do what I say, then you're going to lose some of my love or connection or that kind of thing. And again, there are a lot of people that do that out there. And this is where why looking at this loyalty versus freedom can be very useful in managing your direct environment and the people that are affecting you with their opinions so much. Because again, this falls under that if you're loyal to consciousness and your life and that divine energy, then somebody else's opinion, especially if it's opposed to yours, isn't threatening at all. Because again, we accept that those opposite opinions have to exist. So I think that there can be a slight shift in many of our listeners' minds to take the loyalty off of the person, place, or thing and to put it more into your life and the connection to a higher source. And then allow the people around you to play the roles that they're going to play. We have tons of episodes on what role playing means. And it simply means that if there's like a lesson that I need to learn, say around trust, then somebody in my environment or somebody new is going to come in and do something that I view or perceive as untrustworthy. See, again, that's my perception. It doesn't necessarily mean that they actually did something that was untrustworthy. But when I have that perception and I choose that perception, see, due to consciousness and being loyal to my life and to that divine energy and to consciousness, then I want to look at that. And as soon as I have this reaction because of this event, this trust issue, I simply am able to smile, forgive that person for the role that they played, not get negatively affected by this so-called untrustworthy view and thank them for being your teacher, and you don't allow it to affect and get into your energetic field. And so the more that you practice that, see, the less affected you are by external opinions and points of views. And that is freedom. So see, when you're loyal to your life, you experience this level of freedom. That doesn't mean that people aren't still going to give you opinions and give you harsh views. But see, you can lovingly receive those, because it's not swaying you, because you're not tied into your emotions and them being able to sway you. You're aware of them and you treat them like children. They just don't, they get to have a say, but they don't get to make decisions. So again, that's another connection to children and to emotions. They should get to have a say. They have experiences and they should be able to voice those experiences, but they don't necessarily get to make the decision. And so again, there's a higher self within us. We can have that optimal divine mother, father energy. And when the emotions show up, that's the children. And then we can choose to manage those emotions and get back to seeing things clearly as quickly as possible. And then utilize those around us to help us to shape those sensitivities and to practice by playing the roles that they're here to play.
I think you said this before we started recording, but you mentioned that most people will expect others to bring the same level of loyalty that they feel like that they do, or they're going to view how somebody, is loyal to them based on how loyal they perceive that they are, or how they resonate with that word or how they perceive it. So that kind of goes along with what you just kind of said, where someone could think that somebody's not being loyal based on how they perceive loyalty to be, or based on how they perceive they are loyal to the other person.
Right. Yes. And that creates a lot of confusion and lack of discernment. And see, things build in people's minds as time goes on. So we can just create a movie off of these emotions that carry even no truth sometimes. And so that, that you brought up, that I did mention before we started recording, is that we can all have a tendency to whatever level of morals, whatever values, whatever loyalty that we carry. Most people unconsciously project that that's what they expect from other people around them. And yes, people that have had very different childhoods are very unlikely to meet on those same levels with those things. So here again, see somebody that's very, very trustworthy. Many times they will attract people into their lives that aren't so trustworthy because they're expecting everyone to be as trustworthy as they are, rather than learning and accepting the law of polarity and saying that, hey, untrustworthy people have to exist as well. I don't need to judge them. I just need to manage who I want to keep into my life and not. Um, so that I think is an important part to get across, is that we can create and even take our lessons to an extreme by how dedicated we are to a certain subject or way of viewing things, and not taking into account the polarity law that opposites have to exist. The duality way of looking at things is that, yes, I'm right, you're wrong. And if I talk loud enough, then you'll be able to hear me and it will change your mind. And we want to stay focused on the polarity view.
Yeah. So that person that expects everyone to be trustworthy because they're just not realistic with how people are, or they just haven't had had enough run-ins with people who aren't. So they're going to attract that because they're not going to be able to read that energy right before it happens to them. They're not picking up on the signs. They're kind of naive in a way in that aspect of trustworthiness until they get the lessons. So that's how they're going to
Mhm.
attract that, right?
Yes, yes, and that's what expectations are, is naivety. It's that you're taking something for granted and you're not seeing each person or each situation as an individual experience. You're looking at it as, well, I'm like this, so I just expect everybody else to be like this. And that's a very ignorant and closed-minded way of looking at things, but this is the way most people in our culture do look at things, is that they are projecting whatever they feel about themselves. They're looking for that in other people. And this is why it can be very confusing. But when a very trustworthy person brings in and gets married to or begins a relationship with what seems like a very untrustworthy person, and it's part of learning the lesson from my view of polarity, that, hey, these opposites have to exist. So just the way that you look at things and want things to be, fortunately or unfortunately, isn't the way that it is on this earth plane. Those opposites are going to have to exist. So, see, by accepting that and being willing to, once again, if you're carrying a preference or you're carrying an emotional reaction, you're not seeing the situation clearly. And so again, we're human. We go through those experiences, but just knowing and accepting that, hey, I'm not taking in all this information clearly at this time because I'm distracted, or I am being naive in the situation because I'm not being sensitive to everything that's happening. So again, this gets back to being present, being centered, being so-called conscious, is all taking each moment by moment and truly being in that present moment rather than carrying around all these preferences and all these projections. Yeah.
And the other side of that is if somebody has had uh, many run-ins with untrustworthy people for whatever reason, they keep attracting them. But that can program them to then, when they meet somebody who is trustworthy, they're micro, like, searching for any little thing that they can then be like, yo, you're untrustworthy, and
They're on
then get away
guard.
from me.
Yeah, they're on
So like
guard.
that's the other side. That's the other unbalanced part of it.
Yeah, well said. And that's because, see, the damage of person after person after person being untrustworthy, it skews the way that that trustworthy person sees others over a period of time. And, the point here is that the lesson, if it's happening over and over and over, see, then the lesson's not being learned. And around trustworthiness, that's a boundary issue. And, I've been talking about this a lot lately, that like boundaries and agreements are two different things. Boundaries means that there is a very discernible cost. If you cross this line, this is what's going to happen to you. And then you have to uphold that when somebody does cross that line. And that's challenging in relationships. But see, agreements many times are a whole lot more lighthearted. You can be in a conversation and somebody can say, oh, I agree with you. But then the next day you see them doing something opposite of what they just agreed with you the day before. But see, there's not this drastic cost. You might just go to them and say, hey, I thought you said this yesterday. And then they might be like, well, yeah, well, that's where ideally I want to be. But every now and then I slip into this old pattern, but there's not necessarily a huge cost to that. And I think that, again, highlighting the loyalty part, uh, loyalty can be communicated and it can be boundaries set around it. And two people can grow within that loyalty, especially if they're focused on that loyalty being connected to divine energy and each of their individual lives. And so I hope that everybody's getting out of this talk the amount of freedom that comes from practicing the second pillar of polarity versus duality, accepting these opposites, not being so attached to our loyalties. And see, that's a key, that we're not putting our loyalties on to others, that we see that whatever loyalties we choose is for ourselves, and that we tend to suffer when we go against those so-called loyalties. The loyalties can be seen as part of the structure and discipline as well. So far it's been a great discussion, and I love all the input that you're giving as well. But this is a very wide subject that we probably need multiple episodes to really cover in great depth, and maybe we'll come back to it in a few months and kind of check in and see where people's at with it.
Yeah, whenever we talk about something new in relation to terms and things that I've never really looked at how they play into consciousness, usually they are then at the forefront of my mind, and I go throughout my daily, structure and dealings throughout in the world with that in my mind, and I'm kind of viewing the world through these new terms and stuff. So yeah, I'll probably definitely have a lot more to come back to. But I appreciate this initial conversation on loyalty and freedom and how they interact with each other. And I guess if you don't have anything else, we can wrap this up.
Yeah, just reach out to us, people. Give us some views of like how you're looking at it, how you're working with it. Because again, we want these to turn more and more into interactive and ongoing building off of our experiences. So much love to everybody. Big thank you to Aaron again for all of his help, and look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Appreciate you all listening. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this free version of the Wise podcast. To hear the complete conversation and go deeper into the application of the tools and techniques of the Just Philosophy, head on over to wisewisepodcast.com and become a premium member. You'll get to hear all of our complete conversations, including the complete episodes of our Inward Journey story series and our entire back catalog, and continue your self-development journey with us. We honor your dedication to self-growth, overall wellness, and continuing to ask the wise whys.
And remember, gradual changes over long periods of time equals lasting results.
Continue on your self-growth journey by visiting thejustphilosophy.com, where you are able to connect personally by booking a private consultation with Alexander in person, by phone, or Zoom. Uncover your authentic self more easily with a human design or destiny card consultation. Here you will gain information about your energetic makeup, personality, and your higher self, as well as navigating your way through your relationships. There are also multiple types of reports available for purchase that help you gain insight into your career, relationships, and opportunities for self-growth. The site also allows you to view a calendar of Alexander's live performances and class schedule, peruse other products such as shirts, CDs, and finally, the revolutionary VibroTune vibrational sound therapy tables. These contoured therapy tables allow you to bathe in a vibrational sonic bath of frequencies, bringing you into alignment on all levels. You will be feeling and hearing calming music synced through vibration and frequency. So again, you can grab all this goodness at thejustphilosophy.com, thejustphilosophy.com. The Just Philosophy, as discussed in this podcast, has been developed by Alexander over the last 25 years in his personal studies, private practice, and professional environment. The information discussed is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant as a replacement for conventional medicine. Just remember, knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. Seek the wise. We want to thank you for working on you. Keep shining your light and refining your vibe.